Welcome to this webinar, which provides insights into assessment with a focus on early years practitioners. These insights take account of research and are drawn from inspectors' findings in early years education settings, as well as the guidance provided by inspectors to settings to promote improvement. In this webinar on assessment, we will share some very good assessment practices that we have observed in early learning and care settings during our inspections. Both ASHTR and SHIELTA, the two national practice frameworks, highlight the importance of planning for and assessing children's early learning and development. While planning and assessment are interwoven and interdependent, this webinar will focus on assessment. The ASHTR curriculum framework states that ongoing assessment of what children can do, say and make, and reflections on these experiences helps practitioners plan for developmentally appropriate and meaningful learning experiences for children. This also enables them to improve their practice. Assessment is about building a picture of children's individual strengths, interests, abilities, and needs, and using this to support and plan for their future learning and development. The Department of Education Quality Framework for Early Years Education is informed by both ASHTR and SHIELTA. Within the DE Quality Framework, children are viewed as competent and confident learners, and they are recognised as active agents in their learning. Practitioners play a vital role in supporting children to become actively engaged in assessing their own learning and development. ASHTR provides us with a framework from which to develop a broad-based emergent and inquiry-focused curriculum. An emergent curriculum is not linear. It develops and grows in a cyclical fashion. Let's look at an example we have observed of how practitioners use assessment to implement an effective emergent curriculum. Practitioners play and interact with children daily. As they do so, they observe children's interests, learning, and achievements, and they name and affirm this. They make time and encourage children to share, discuss, reflect on, and self-assess their learning and achievements daily. Practitioners document some of their key observations. They reflect on them, ideally with their colleagues, to make meaning and to assess them across all 4 themes in ASHTR. This valuable information is then used to inform short-term planning. Practitioners may plan to build on a child's current interest, modify or enhance the learning environment, organise a particular learning activity that will support progression in their learning, or move the children on in their learning. And the cycle repeats. As you can see, assessment is one of the integral elements of this curriculum cycle. Inspectors find that in high-quality early years educational settings, observations and on-the-spot assessment or formative assessment is happening daily within the practitioner's everyday play activities and conversations with the children. Assessment for learning is part of practitioners' daily interactions with children. During our inspections, we have observed practitioners very effectively form many of their assessments primarily on the observation of children's everyday activities and interactions. Here are some examples of the effective practice that you can use. As you play and interact with children, observe the following. What are the children playing? Is it new? Is it repeated? For example, as you sit close to Sam, you may note that he has chosen to play with farm animals for 3 days in a row. Dig deep for detail. What's the focus of the children's play? As you continue to observe, you notice that Sam is placing the animals into groups. What are the children saying? As you listen, you hear Sam say, "Oh no, not you, you don't go there," as he moves a horse from a cow group and places it with a horse group. What are the children thinking and wondering and curious about? You hear Sam say, "You don't live there, but you can visit the cows." After allowing yourself time to observe, you might name and discuss the interests and learning you are observing with the children. Talk about what the children are doing and trying to do. For example, you have been observing Eve constructing with small wooden blocks. You might comment on exactly what you see her doing. You're trying really hard to make those long blocks balance on top of the small ones. It's really tricky. Ask the children what they are feeling, thinking, and wondering. You might simply ask Eve, "Tell me what you're doing." Or you may inquire, "I wonder what different ways you tried to make it balance." Give positive affirmation and encouragement. You might state, "This is very difficult, and you are trying lots of different ways to find what works, Eve." Name the learning and the achievements for the children. You might state, "You are learning how to balance the blocks. The small ones are easy for you to balance, but the big ones are a bit more difficult. Keep going, you're going to get it." Practicing strategies such as those listed above can help you to integrate formative assessment into your daily practice. The Quality Framework for Early Years Education states that information about the children's learning is regularly documented to build a rich picture of the children's learning and development. As busy practitioners, you need to be selective about what you document in order to make children's learning visible in a manner that supports decision-making and planning for the next steps in learning. The following are some highly effective practices and approaches that we have observed on inspection. Create a rich portrait of a child's learning journey over time. Documentation records and creates evidence of learning. It records significant moments and achievements and tracks progress over time. Each child is unique, and their learning and developmental journey in the early years is highly individual. In settings where this principle guides the practitioner's approach to documentation, each child's assessment is individual and unique. It is a genuine portrait of them as a learner over time. Make it strengths-based and use a wide variety of methods. Children demonstrate their learning, development, and achievement in many various ways. Therefore, the methods we use to gather, document, and assess also need to be varied. Many settings create a rich picture of children's learning journey by compiling a learner journal or portfolio, which uses a variety of assessment approaches to gather information about children's learning experiences and achievements. Some examples of methods we have observed practitioners use to effectively document include anecdotal notes, brief descriptions which can be composed with the child, narratives such as learner stories, records of children's conversations, reflections, and self-assessments, photographs of children at play, investigation, construction, experimentation, work samples, art, mark-making, constructions, audios and video recordings. All of the above can be documented with individual and groups of children. Assess across all 4 themes in ASHTR. ASHTR provides us with a broad framework of learning and development experiences against which to assess information documented about each child. It directs us to assess with a strengths-focused lens across all 4 themes: well-being, identity and belonging, communicating, exploring and thinking. Keep a focus on highlighting, describing and assessing children's dispositions, attitudes and values, skills, knowledge and understanding. This graphic displays the 5 methods of assessment identified in ASHTR. To demonstrate how the child's voice can remain central and meaningful to assessment, each method is firstly explored through ideas for practice, followed by an example of an effective practice observed during early years education inspections. To foster the skills of self-assessment, use your interactions and modelling to provide the children with the opportunity and the means of communication to discuss, make sense of, and plan for their own learning. Consider the best way for each child to communicate. For children who are using language, use appropriate questioning, such as, "How did you do that? I wonder what would have happened if," to support them to think deeply about their play and learning. Help them to identify the next steps in their learning through prompting commentary. How would you do it differently if you were doing it again? Some children can be supported to communicate really effectively about their learning through pictures, objects and communicative systems such as PECS and LOVE. Additionally, you can provide the children with access to the documentation of their learning, to prompt recall and to give them autonomy over the records. The children were included in a meeting to share their learning and achievements with their parents. This encourages the children to become skilled in self-assessment, to recognise their own progress and learn how to identify the possible next steps in their learning. During conversations, listen carefully to what the children are saying and use thought-provoking language and questioning to garner a deeper understanding of what the children are thinking and feeling and why. Speaking with the child about an identified interest can delve deeper into how it can be developed to support their learning. You might ask, "Why do you think that happened? What might we do differently the next time?" While exploring the children's learning journals together, the practitioner and the child discuss past learning experiences, and supported by the practitioner, the child makes connections with their present learning. Together, they decide to record this important conversation in the learning journal. Use observations to see and hear the children's learning, to garner information on present learning and provide focus for future development. Many early years practitioners look to the children's non-verbal cues, such as actions, facial gestures, body language, and creative expression, such as mark-making, art, and music. Inspectors note that observation is particularly important for capturing the voice of the child, who uses pictures, objects, and communicative systems to express themselves. The children play an active role in the process of collecting observations of their learning and development. On the day of the inspection, children used the camera to take photographs of the work they were completing and were interested in. Organise strength-based tasks and activities to support the development of specific skills using activities and resources that are exciting and meaningful to the child. Although these methods are adult-led, the child's voice and thoughts are essential to ensure the assessment remains authentic and purposeful. They can be effective in exploring a previously identified aspect of the children's learning and development. Use materials that are familiar and enjoyable to the children, and provide them with opportunities to talk about what they are doing, give them affirmative feedback, and discuss how their learning might be developed. The practitioners examined previous observations and documented interests. They spoke to the children's parents about how specific skills could be supported through purposeful tasks and activities, in a way that remains meaningful and exciting to the child. This webinar will now illustrate how you can collaborate with the children's parents and families for assessment. Each idea for practice is once again followed by an example of effective practice identified through early years education inspections. Support parents to understand the value of assessment in early education and its role in building rich stories of what and how the children learn, develop and progress. Many settings provide information to the parents about the curriculum and assessment through handbooks, procedures and open evenings. Feeling informed about the curriculum and assessment supports parents to see the important part they can play in their children's learning and often gives parents the confidence to support the continuity of learning at home. At the start of the year, the practitioners seek the parents' expectations of curriculum and assessment through a questionnaire. After a period of time, they invite parents into a meeting where they discuss and address any potential concerns going forward. Implement a key person approach, where each child is assigned a key practitioner, whose responsibilities include ensuring that the voice of their key child is captured through observations and documentation, building and supporting the relationship with parents and families, and facilitating regular two-way communication about the child's learning and development. An attractive photographic display communicates the details of a key person system to the children's parents. The key person ensures that the information documented on their key children's learning is effectively shared with the parents on a regular basis. Opportunities are provided for the parents to comment on and review their children's learning. To respectfully, effectively, and sensitively support each child's individual learning journey, it is very important to really get to know the children and their families, to understand the child's culture, family structure, and background. Many early years practitioners gather this information initially through getting to know you forms, visits and meetings. However, it is important that an open channel of communication remains to ensure that the early years practitioners are aware of any changing situations in the child's life. A wonderfully inclusive, non-denominational winter solstice celebration was held in the early years education setting, where the parents and the children came together for a bonfire, gift sharing and music. Sharing the children's individual and group learning experiences with parents regularly provides them with insights into their children's learning and gives suggestions for how they might support learning at home. Many early learning and care settings display learning stories, create group learning journals and individual learning journals, so they are accessible to parents. Parents are invited to comment on and provide information on things that their children enjoy, as well as things that they find difficult. During holiday times, the children take their individual learning journals home with them. This provides a wonderful opportunity for the parents and the children to sit and have a discussion in their own time about what is in the journal. The children share valuable perspectives about their drawings, photos, etc., and the parents write their thoughts into the book before returning. Involve parents as partners in their children's learning journey. Just as it is important to share assessment information with parents, it is also important that parents are encouraged and feel confident to share information with the early years practitioners. Some parents may need assistance with this. For example, parents whose first language is neither English nor Irish, or parents who may not feel confident in meeting practitioners, or who perhaps may feel uncomfortable with the idea of assessment. Some of the methods of communication used include social media, a monthly newsletter, an extensive notice board, requests for parents to contribute to their children's learning journal, an open door policy, and a suggestion box seeking parental feedback. As you have seen, whilst completing our evaluations in early learning and care settings, we have had the privilege of observing effective assessment practices. Please take a moment to consider the following exemplar, which depicts high-quality assessment practices. Here are some links to resources which we think may be informative for you as a practitioner. This brings us to the close of this webinar, and we would like to thank you for listening. We hope it provides helpful advice. If you have direct queries or comments arising from your engagement with this webinar, please use the dedicated email address provided to send your comments to us on insights_info@education.gov.ie.